Hi. Oh, these nighttime schedules, always very dependent on babies. This is not the lighting I would like, but welcome to the first training. I think I'm going to be of two. How to find your creative flow. Now, excuse me while I get myself all settled. I'm in my bedroom because that's the only place to kind of be settled and I can focus on this, on you, on this, my notes, because this is a serious thing when I've got my notes on how do you find your creative flow. Now, first of all, finding your creative flow and connecting to that requires knowing your creativity and knowing, being connected to your creative practice. And this is a lifelong thing. And so sometimes when you say something is like a lifelong adventure and it's a connection thing, it's a lifetime thing, you can tend to very easily take it for granted and then toss it into the I will deal with it later basket, or the it's too overwhelming basket, or I'll start a bit later because I've got plenty of time. And that's why I found when I think of it that way, I never connect with it. And so I have to give myself a kind of project or an intense deadline or something where then you have to deal with it now. There has to be a reason for dealing with it now, because there is no time like the present to really connect and to cultivate that connection with your creativity and to know your creative practice. And if you're here and you resonate with me, then I know for you, your creativity is an important part of your life. It's part of your expression and your ability to be able to fully express. And so knowing what your creative practice involves and just your creativity and be able to be connected to that is an important thing. And that's why I want to start with, I know it's a lifelong thing, but at the same time, that's why I know that having the commitment to dedicate yourself to a period of time, like a project, which is why I am launching Project 100 as a course mentoring program, because then that's when you can really, I guess, focus and immerse yourself for a set period of time so it doesn't get too overwhelming, and really cultivate that clarity and connection to your creativity and find your flavor of creative flow, really, which is why we're here. Right? And these are my habits. I don't use these all the time, but these are my like little hacks, I guess you could say, or tips and tricks that you can use to tap yourself back to your creative flow. And the other thing to know is you need to know your own flavor of it. You need to know the creative cycle and all of this information. I could go on and on about it forever and ever, which is why like I have a whole business on this and I talk about it a lot. And that's why I have my Muse Mama membership, where we really explore about this and dive deep and really go into deeper of this about flow and creativity, and really having that immersion to your creativity through the course Creativity Catalyst, which is where I'm taking this from, which is some of the notes, and obviously go deeper in Muse Mama. I will talk about this later. Let's dive in. We're here for a short period of time. Thank you for being here. If you are here with me live, make sure you say hi, and comment #yay live. And if you're watching the replay, hi replay viewers, still comment #yay replay so that I know you're here. Your comments, your love hearts really boost my videos, and it really helps Facebook push it out to more people, and especially for people that you may know who you know want to connect with their creativity and want to find their creative flow. I would love for you to share this video. That would really make my day. And anytime you resonate and any part of this training that you're getting ahas and stuff, I would love to know what they are. Type them in. Even if you're watching this as a replay, I'm still loving to hear the comments and to connect with you in this way. And any love heart showers are always deeply appreciated, and it does help these videos get seen. So flow, when we talk about flow, creative flow, right, we are talking about being connected in your creativity in such a way that you can find your way into that flow state. And I'm assuming you know what creative flow kind of feels like. You know that timelessness feeling where you feel like time goes by so quickly and you had no idea because you were so immersed in what it was that you were doing. That is flow. When you're, I guess it's the idea of being in the zone, and to be able to tap into it is to not only be able to experience it, but to be able to recognize when and the conditions that you need for your creative practice to really get into flow kind of on command, on tap, as I call it. And so one of the first things is to really, and I think I said this even before we started this training, and is to know yourself and to be connected to yourself and be connected to your creativity. And that usually requires daily connection, just like any relationship. And it doesn't mean you have to spend hours in the studio in order to be connected to your creativity. Sometimes it's just a 5-minute mindfulness moment where you recognize the creative energy that was used to make the beautiful handmade cup, which I have here. Just got my cough medicine hot drink in here. But like, just to be mindfully connect to this creativity, and the appreciation of that is part of your creative practice as well. Stuff like that every day means you're connected to it, and it means the more you know yourself, the more your ability to recognize when you're in the zone, when you're out, because we kind of know when we're out because you feel stuck and everything kind of feels really hard and clunky. But when you're really in it and you're in the zone, and then being mindful means you might recognize the things, the conditions that was around it in order for you to slip into it. And then once you know that, you can then find and try and replicate it again for next time when you want to do it on tap. And so what I'm here to talk about is a few that I use that you can then apply to your creative practice. There's going to be 3 I'm sharing, pretty sure. Yeah, 3. Because otherwise this training could go on forever and I can't cover everything. And as I said, this is brought to you by Project 100, which I'll talk about a bit later, which is more of a course mentoring program. I'll talk about it later. And Muse Mama is with my membership, where it's for ambitious, spiritual, creative women who want to live a life of joyful purpose, who are weaving business and art and your calling with babies and your children, but you know that there is a next chapter for you. Maybe they don't need you as much, they're a little bit more independent, whether that is just, they're toddlers, or they're going to daycare now, or they're going to high school, which blows my mind, and you're trying to find that next chapter, and you know that involves your creativity. And inside Muse Mama is where this Creativity Catalyst course is, where it goes into a deeper immersion into finding a creative spark. Anyway, so let's go first tip to how to find your creative flow. Now, at any time that this resonates with you, definitely comment below hashtag yay love this. Then I know that you resonate with it, and then I also know which points kind of resonates with you. So first one of my most favorite ways, and really the most efficient for my practice, because I've got a 4-year-old and a now 11-month-old, she's almost 1, at home, and she's at home full time, and so I am always constantly trying to juggle kinder runs and naps and nappy changes and all the things, constantly making them food and worrying about food and all that kind of stuff. And so for me, one of my favorite ways is to have routine and rituals, right? Routines and rituals feels counterintuitive to a creative practice, because we tend to stereotypically think of creativity as like a crazy, chaotic, everything's everywhere, there is no rhyme or reason, kind of messy, everything everywhere-ness, and that's where creativity comes from. And yeah, in order for me to find my way into flow, I've had to train my brain to associate certain things so that it can, because I know certain conditions bring me into flow. And so what that means is I have my routines and my rituals, right? And so things like knowing I'm sitting down in the same spot in my kitchen bench where I have my tools laid out with the watercolor things and the little pieces of paper and the ones that I'm working on for my painting a day spiral painting a day project. And I do that in between all the mess and the children and all that kind of stuff. But because it's all laid out and everything's kind of ready, that's almost like a routine, but I treat it almost like a ritual itself, which basically for me means taking a mindful moment to really step into that kind of sacred moment. And I'm not taking 10 minutes even to do this. This is like 2 minutes here and there. It's just like make sure the kitchen bench is roughly clear and I have a little space, which is tiny little space to just put my paints, the little cup of water and my papers out there ready. And that kind of brings my brain, when I sit down on that same seat and it's that routine, I can then easily slip into that creative flow and start my painting, right? And it's not exact instant sometimes. Sometimes my brain is still whirring around with, oh, I need to get to that, I need that errand, I'm gonna remember to do this. But when I bum sit in that chair and I take up that brush, that routine and that ritual, having it all set out already, really brings my brain to a point where I really calm and I'm really settled and I have this spaciousness in my mind where then I can really focus onto that painting and really get into that flow. And that painting session may only be 10-15 minutes, but in that 10-15 minutes I'm fully focused on that piece of work and that spiral painting. And so for you, it might mean, this is once again, always knowing yourself, knowing what you need around you, what your conditions are, thinking back to when you were totally in the zone and what was it around you? What did you do right beforehand? What did you have around you physically? What were you thinking about mentally? What kind of really brought you to that, that pause, that kind of mental space where you're just really present, and then you kind of slipped into the zone and you might not even have known it at the time. But then when you look back, just think back and how can you then apply this now in the future? How could you set your tools up in such a way and treat that like a ritual and make it not take forever? Because then that's such an easy excuse to have to spend an hour to clean every single time before you create, even though that is something, one of my rituals that I do. Sometimes when I'm feeling really stuck and I feel like I can't really get into painting, it might mean I need to spend 20 minutes to really clear my studio out and put things away and just like really declutter it. But I do that intentionally. I do that with a sense of ritual, even though it's not exact time, it's not in an exact place, it's not done in the exact way, same way each time. But because that sense of ritual, that sense of mindfulness, it trains my mind, and it doesn't have to happen straight away and overnight. But if you do it every single time and you train yourself and then you step there and you embrace those periods of time where as you're training your brain, where it is uncomfortable, you're not fully into flow, but eventually you will get there. And then you cement that routine and that ritual with that being in a zone, being in flow state, and your brain will then recognize it, and then you'll be able to use it each time when you want to pull it on tap. So let me see what my notes might say. So always keep it simple and keep tweaking, and different seasons of your life means you might have to tweak it accordingly and find different ways, and that's part of the creative practice. You've got to be creative with your creative practice and with the way you kind of work with yourself and in connection with your creativity, and that requires you to be connected to your creativity. And so one of the things as well is like my morning coffee cup. It's my cup. Sometimes I have to be really ritualistic. Excuse me while I take a sip. And just settle into this present moment and say to myself, I'm going to start painting now. And that might mean stepping up to my easel. I've already decluttered the day before. I've already done all that kind of stuff. My tools and stuff are ready. What is the trigger that I'm going to need to make me pause and recognize, hey, and tell my brain, even if it's subconsciously, it's time to start painting now. It's time to step into and dip into and connect into my creativity and unleash that onto the canvas. And so routines, rituals, that's my first thing. It is for you. How could you train yourself, even if you have to? It's like making a new habit. Train yourself with the trigger. What is it that you're going to use to be a mindful thing? And every time you just use it. And maybe the first few times you weren't in the zone, but you still use it each time. But you know that every time you sit down on your desk and you want to do your writing, you will eventually hit that flow state. And so then you mindfully remember that and remember the conditions around it and have that coffee cup ready so that you've been using it and connecting that with your brain to be the trigger to get you into flow, right? So now that we talk about routines and rituals and having that and training your brain to recognize something, to do it a certain way so that you can slip into flow on command, the flip side of that is actually variety. That's the second tip for how to find your creative flow. Adding a touch of variety to your habits, right? Because just like even any relationship, you know, when things kind of get boring and you do get into a routine and everything, and then it's kind of gets boring and gets a little bit dull, and then there's none of that spark, and without that spark you're not going to get into creative flow. So it's a delicate balance. It's the duality of you need that comfort and then knowing that ritual and that routine to really slip into it. But on the other hand, when you lean too much onto that side and you don't have variety, you lose that connection and that ability to get into creative flow on tap. And so what I found is when you add variety, it's because it's that spark and it's almost that sense of uncomfortableness because it's rubbing a different way, and which means you're much more present. A lot of this is about being present, right? You're much more present, and when you're much more present, your ability to get into creative flow, because it's a little harder. So one of the tips in terms of variety is like, look at cooking. Okay, there's your tried and true recipes that you know you could just do in your sleep, and you know you just kind of do it, and then you can get into flow with that because you don't even have to think about it anymore. You just know what you need to pull, you know what you need to do, and then before you know it, in the blink, it's already the end of the night and you've got to start doing the bath routine and bedtime routine, all that kind of stuff, and that's a sense of flow. But sometimes that kind of gets really dull and then you get into it and you can't get into it. So when you try a whole new recipe that just add a variety to your normal routine, you really have to focus. You have to look at what you're doing. You really have to be present, and you can't be distracted by all the inner critic noises in your head and distractions by the busyness of life and all that kind of stuff. And when you're really focused and you're like looking at the recipe because you don't know what to do next, and you have to check in every single time with the instructions, but at the same time you're like learning something new, but it's not too hard that it's too overwhelming. You're like getting something new. That means you also become more focused. That's how you can get into a flow as well. It's like when you're trying something that's new, that's just a little harder than what you're used to, but you can still totally do it, then you become fully focused and into it. That's when you find that time passes really, really quickly, and before you know it, it's 3 hours has passed by and you've just learned something new, and it's different, like going to a new dance class or something. Or even if it's just something simple to add like a new recipe to your normal dinner menu planning, or if it's just trying a different, which is why I tried my painting a day project, so that try a different medium to really retrain myself how to get into creative flow, because your creative flow is pretty much the same regardless of the medium, but because I was trying something new, it meant that I had to really focus and really get into this hard, wrapping my head around a harder medium. I found myself in flow a lot faster because I had to really focus, even if it was in 10 minutes at a time. And so that's why these two tips are kind of together. On the one hand, you've got your routine, your rituals, and you need that. And once you know those things, you can really find your way into creative flow very quickly. But on the other hand, to make sure that you don't kind of fall flat and lose that creative spark, you've got to add some variety into your creative practices as well, whatever that is. So maybe with your writing, instead of writing on your computer like you normally do and you're sitting in the same spot, maybe it is going to a cafe and sitting down and doing it there as well, and just adding that something different gives you that spark of difference, because our brain just loves that. And then you'll find another way to really tap into flow again, and then it makes it less boring, because your creativity and your inner muse hates boring, but at the same time it doesn't like too much change either, which is why you need the balance. It's the duality of routine and rituals and variety. Say hi if you're on and you're watching. Make sure you comment below #YayLive so that I know you're on. And if any of this resonates with you, definitely #routine rituals if that's something that you want to try, or #variety if that's something else that you want to add to your repertoire and to your creative practice. And so, like, I would love to know, what routines and rituals do you have in your creative practice? What is it that you use to trigger and find your way into creative flow? Or are you always feeling creatively stuck at the moment and you want to add something, and you need to find your way into finding flow and you're really struggling with that? Is it just a mindset shift of recognizing that you might, I only get 10-15 minutes sometimes to paint, but I know in that 10-15 minutes I know how to be fully focused and really tap into flow at that time, no matter how compressed my time is, and still be able to paint something on the spot. And that requires me to have that both routine and rituals, but also add variety in the paint marks that I use when I do my painting. I would love to know. Add your comments below so that I can see where you're at with this whole creative practice thing. Let's see. How long have I been on here? Oh, I've been here 20 minutes. All right. Third and last tip, just so that to recap, there's going to be another video where I'll share another 3 tips because I don't want to be on here forever. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, the practice into finding your creative flow is a lifelong thing. But sometimes a lifelong thing can feel like something you can do a bit later, when really it's something that you need to start now if you want to take your creativity and your creative practice seriously. You want to step up to a different level from just hobbyist, or you just want to stop being the person who is constantly scrolling Facebook and wishing that your life was the one that's more interesting in doing creative things versus just watching everybody else doing it. And if you're feeling that connection and resonance with me, with the ideas of being a muse mama, which is to really be able to weave your creative calling and the things that you want to do in your next chapter outside, beyond, do more than where you are as just a mum. And even though you're fully grateful that this season of your life as a mama is still a big part of you, you know that there is something more. Then maybe you are a muse mama. And let me see, I can probably add the link in the comments because that's the way Facebook likes to work with it. You know, are you a muse mama? If you resonate with being a muse mama, hashtag muse mama below, and I will make sure you get all the information about what a muse mama is if you like to join the little village. They always say that it takes a village to raise a child. I think it takes a village as well to raise the kind of warrior, creative, ambitious, spiritual mama that you want to be connected to your calling, to finally do something about that inner nudge that's just telling you that there's a next chapter, there's something more than where you're at right now. And you know that when you do that and you actually do something, you know, a little selfish just for you, you actually come back to your mamahood and to your babies a much better mum, a much better woman, and you can show up in a much better way. And so if you resonate with that, Muse Mama might be for you. And I only bring it up because really Muse Mamas get 50% of my current new program that I'm doing called Project 100, which is about finding your voice and finding your flow and building a body of work for the creatives who are wanting to really take their creative practice seriously and raise it up from hobbyists who are kind of floating on the surface, trying a whole bunch of stuff, but not really having a solid body of work and not really knowing what your creative voice is. And when you don't know what your creative voice is, it's really hard to find your creative flow. And even though there's 2 trainings today, I've already cut 2 tips and I've got 1 more tip to go. Make sure you comment below because it really helps my videos to be seen. And let me add that link first of all to Muse Mama, and you will find that if that resonates with you. And it's right now at the lowest investment, and you'll have that for life. And inside there's like over $2,000 worth of value in terms of connection with the village. You have access to my creativity resources, my signature deliberate doodles courses in there, as well as you have access to behind the scenes of me training, hot seats with me, and first dibs to all my consulting and mentoring at VIP Muse Mama only exclusive prices as well. And also access to my paintings and stuff if you are interested in that. Let me add this quickly. Excuse me. I'm still recovering from my cold. So there is that. Cool. Yes, so that's the comment there for Muse Mama, and I will share more about Project 100 after this. So to recap, we've had 2 tips about how to find your creative flow. First is to know your routines and rituals, and to have knowing certain triggers that can really teach your brain and train your brain and get yourself to be present and paused and mindful of this moment, and so you can slip into flow on command, even if it's compressed time. You don't have a full hour or 2 hours to really ease your way in there. Sometimes if you're a muse mama like me and you got to weave babies and nappies and naps and things with your creative work, and as a professional artist, I have to really produce on tap whenever I have a chance, really, in this season of my life with a 4-year-old and a 11-month-old. And so I need to have my routines and my rituals. And really that is a sense of picking what they are for you, but also at the same time recognizing what has worked for you in the past that slipped you into the zone, and noticing what the conditions were. Is it certain things around you? Could you choose intentionally, which you can, train yourself, using your coffee cup morning drink to remind you, and that's when you're going to slip into flow, and or having your tools all set up already down for you, and make sure that that's a routine, so that when you step into the studio, wherever your studio is, you know you can fully show up and really get into flow and not waste any time straight away. And it just tricks your mind, and the more often you do that, even for the times when it doesn't quite work, but you keep intentionally and mindfully doing that, you will find that eventually those do become triggers for you, which is how I found that as well with my kitchen bench. I can really train my brain to slip into flow, even if it's only in 10-15 minute little slots in between dealing with the kids and stuff. And so routines and rituals are really important, in finding your way with that. And the flip side of that is variety, adding variety to your normal habits and routines. And so there are things that we do all the time without even thinking about it, but that doesn't mean you can find your way into creative flow, especially when you need to create something on demand in that sense. Excuse me. And so having something different, having something that's a little different to what you're used to, which means you might have to be a little clunky and clumsy and like hard, I guess, but not hard in the sense where it's too difficult, but it has a level of difficulty where you kind of really have to focus. Like imagine when you're first driving. Like now you can just drive without even thinking about what's involved. But when you're first driving, there were so many things to pay attention to. You were so focused and you're probably a little clenched. But that focus is also how you can find your way into creative flow. And so I use the example of trying a whole new recipe for, let's say, your next dinner. And don't go all out, but like just something different. And there's your usual recipes that you know and you could do in your sleep, but then something different to try out. It means you really have to focus. It really means you have to pay attention to the detail and check in and really focus on the task at hand. And you'll find that that's when you really do get into the zone, because you can't be distracted. You can't be doing a whole bunch of other stuff, which you can do when you're doing something that you normally do. And then you get distracted by kids and you get distracted by all the things that you have to do. You have to really focus on that one task at hand. And that's also another way to find your creative flow. And so now we're up to the third last tip for tonight. There's another training that's going to be on Friday night. Make sure you come to that as well. If you haven't already, make sure you like my page, and you can change your notifications to see first, and then that way you will know and don't miss out on the next training. So the third tip, third way, and I don't use all of these at once. They're just all kind of part of my creative practice now. And because I do this professionally, I'm always practicing a whole bunch of these at a time. And so the third one is this is a combination of hacks. This is in my notes. It's a combination of hacks that I found that they work best together. And there isn't really a specific order. They're kind of interchangeable, but they're kind of still meant to work together. And I call it prayer, pause, presence. And I talked about a whole bunch of these in the routine and rituals and in variety as well. But prayer is about intentionally, for that moment, connecting with God, connecting with that divine inner connection. Whatever your flavor of your spirituality is, your creativity really comes from you, but sometimes it comes from this place that it's beyond you. And then you step back and you're amazed that you made this thing, especially when you've been in a zone for a while, and then you step out and you're like, whoa, where was I? Where did all that time go? How did I find all that ability to focus in such an intense way and feel like it was only 2 seconds? And then you create this incredible thing that you're like, I don't know where that came from. And so for me, that's connection to God, really. That is when you're fully being a vessel and you're allowing that creativity to come through you. And part of being in flow is really being connected to that. And so prayer is about intentionally connecting with God and, really taking a minute. Sometimes when I've been out of it for a while, sometimes I'm just stepping bravely but fearfully in front of the easel, and I've been out of it for a while, and I've got all my routines, I'm trying something different, But sometimes it just needs a little prayer to be intentional for a moment, to really connect within and use that to find your creative flow. And this might be part of your rituals, it might be part of your routine, it might be something different to add to your normal habits. But prayer, pause, presence. You don't have to use it in that order, but sometimes just having a little prayer really does help. And I know this feels a bit, I don't know, too spiritual, but really that connection is also, even if it's just telling your brain to mindfully connect to that inner part of you, that's your genius or your inner genius, your inner muse, to really come forward and just like telling it to come out and play. It is time now. I am ready. Even if I've only got 20 minutes, I am ready and I want to get into that dance or flow with you. Pause is that, I said this about the routine and being present and all that kind of stuff, which is where the prayer, pause, presence come from. Pause is really taking a moment to breathe and to really be here, which is part of the presence part, right? The pause is also not just about being present, but also sometimes it's about pausing all the chatter in your brain. All the negative, oh, this is what you have to do and what you should do, and this is who are you to think this and want this and try this. To pause, let's pause all that noise, pause all that fear and doubt and, you know, all the stuff that resistance try to lie at you and throw at you and to really basically stop you in your tracks. If you can pause that for a second and then connect within, try your routines, say your prayer, and get into flow. Because you can't slip into flow if you're bringing a whole bunch of crap and baggage with you. Sometimes being in flow really means having all the shackles removed, allowing yourself to really dive in, and you can't really fully dive in if a part of you is still attached to a whole bunch of other stuff and distractions and all that kind of things. And so a pause, so that's why I put it in these categories: the prayer, pause, presence, right? So the prayer is really about connecting within, connecting with spirituality, connecting with God, connecting with the part of you where creativity and all those inspired ideas come from. Pause is to really clear yourself, to really be present, but really pause all the junk and remove all the negativity, remove the doubts, even if it's just for this one session, you know, and just tell it for this one session that you're just going to allow yourself to play and allow yourself to have fun and allow yourself to really dive in to that sense of flow. And then presence, right, which is presence. The whole point of saying a little prayer, of having a pause, is to be present, to be here, to really notice where you are. And it's really one of the most important elements of flow, to be honest, is to be here, to really notice, to really get rid of all the stuff. Because all that chatter is also very much future thinking or past reliving,